Right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest in the Navigating Turbulent Times series in terms of our digital twin series. And this is part 3, looking at the digital twin journey series, establishing the single source of truth. So welcome to those that have joined us on part 1 and 2, and I appreciate some of the audience are joining us for the first time. So today's episode is about really one aspect that's been brought up on the previous 2 webinars we've conducted, is around digital skills and basically how there's more detail and consideration needed around this question. And that's something that's come up on the previous 2 episodes, as I mentioned, around what is digital skills and what is FM's role in this. So today I've got 2 great speakers, one speaker that actually took part in part 1. So if you just move along to the next slide. Less about me, I'm Peter Brogan, host of today. So many of you would have seen me on previous episodes, head of research and insight here at the Institute. So there you've got the speakers in front of you there that you'll be hearing from today. So first off, we've got Bola Abisungan, OBE, Digital Director at BIM Academy. So if I can say good afternoon, Bola, if you can do a short introduction to the audience viewers, just about yourself and what they'd be expecting to hear from you today.
Thank you, Peter. And also thank you to Gordon. Thank you to IWFM. My name is Bola Abisungan, OBE. I'm the Digital Director of BIM Academy, as stated. Really humbled to be here. It's a conversation that I've been exploring now for almost 2 decades. I'm a chartered QS by profession, always been a bit of a tech fan. I want to help the FM sector literally explode and take its presence. And I just think this conversation it excites me, and I'm hoping that I can share some insight around what digital construction and digital asset management, and in the context of the Building Safety Act, can do for the FM sector. So yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you, Bola. And I've had a sneak peek of your slides, of course, and yeah, it's very action-packed. So listeners, viewers, you're in for a treat. And also on today's webinar, we've got Gordon Mitchell, as I said, was part of the first part in this series around digital twins, digital solution architect, key facilities management, and Keystone workplace software. And also hasten to add our head of our technology special interest group in terms of chairmanship. So Gordon, good afternoon to your dear self.
Thanks, Peter. Echo Bola's statement. I think today we're really going to look at how to position the workplace and facility manager professional at the head of this digital change across the digital built environment, and hopefully enthuse some activity into reimagining who and what I guess we are with this digital empowerment. And yeah, I'm going to take a little walk through my new organisation, Holus, who is really looking to target some of these pertinent points.
Thank you, Gordon and Bola. So just before I hand over to Gordon to go through the exciting content that's in store for you today, just to remind viewers, listeners, we do have a Q&A section in today's webinar. So would encourage you to send your questions through as you go along. And obviously we take as many of those questions on that dedicated section. But enough from me. You're here to listen to the content and the excellent speakers we have today. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Gordon, and I see most of you back on the webinar at the Q&A. So Gordon, over to your dear self.
Thanks, Peter. So as I say, we've in the past 2 episodes, we've been very much looking at the building-centric position around digitizing it and the sort of rise of digital twins. But hopefully, as we've outlined so far, we are very much in a position where without digital skills, does a digital twin actually lose its capabilities and start to become a very expensive reference document? So I'm going to walk through a little bit of the general digital skills landscape beyond FM, and then start to look at 4 main components of maybe why would an FM even think about bringing this digital transformation into their portfolio in the States. And yeah, certainly throughout the session today, as a technology special interest group, we're also looking at what do we do in 2023. So if there's any sub-components of anything that's discussed either by myself or Bola that inspires, I'd like to know more, then please drop it in the chat and we can encompass some of these ideas into our 2023 programme. So the first saying I've got here is from Benjamin Franklin, and I think this to me encapsulates exactly where we are in so many ways. It's digital transformation that doesn't transform the workplace and FM professional is not digital transformation, and it won't work and it won't stick. And the failure statistics are there across every country on the planet for when this doesn't encompass that holistic change. So I feel this is a very, very underestimated point in digital transformation. And in actual fact, from my own point of view, I would start with the organization, with the culture, and then the operation, because those are the elements that really create a foundation for successful digital transformation. So very briefly, just one slide here on this logo that you'll see in the top right, and that's the business that I've just founded myself. So that's looking at these different pillars of digital transformation and how to bring a really encompassing methodology to how you go about changing your estates and your facilities. And as I say, to me, if it's human-centric in its aspirations, then it's operationally foundationed for its success. So, beyond FM, on the left-hand side here, you can see an image from the Gemini papers, which came out of the Centre for Digital Built Britain. And you can see the different types of skills, both at a business organizational level and at a professional level. To be honest, there's going to be some information later on that's going to blow that out the water in a far greater detail. I won't steal any of the thunder of that, but the change is rife and it's multifaceted. But that doesn't mean we need to become all technologists. We just need to know how it aligns to us and to our operations. And if partnerships are needed, if technology is needed, then these things can augment onto our FM and workplace strategies. But what's really important here is that the tail doesn't start wagging the dog. We know what excellence looks like in the workplace. We know what excellence looks like in facilities management. Those haven't changed. The toolkit that we need to use has. And on the right-hand side, you can see the European Commission document around general digital skills across all of Europe. So it's not just an FM. These challenges of digitizing our professionals and our portfolios is in all sectors and in all countries. So this is not something that the world's just, got in an isolation with workplace and FM. So we need to create compelling reasons for why our value proposition is a place to attract new professionals, retain existing professionals, and really move into this new space of data-driven environments and experience excelling places and spaces. So the first thing, as I've just mentioned, is places and spaces and things, typically assets, but it can be anything that you find in your environments. And I guess at the foundation of all the digital environment is any effect you're going to instigate is going to normally result in something, some space or some place. So the examples I've given here are things like Uniclass. You've got other naming conventions like Co-Class and Omniclass and Vebis and so on and so forth. But those are structures and almost taxonomies, if you like, for how to name consistently everything in your portfolio. You have things like IFC, which is looking more at that schema and that structural component. So how, from a computer readable perspective, the machines don't know that a room sits inside a floor unless you tell it it does. So we have to create these environments that really give us an ability for all our intelligence to find a home. And then I've mentioned BRIC, and there's various ontologies out there, real estate core, haystacks, there's various emerging ones, and some of those, if you've keep up with ontologies, you can see some of these ontologies are even converging. As Peter said at the beginning, it's the single source of truth, but at the foundation of that, we need a very concise, computer readable environment, and that means you need to define what you have, where you have it, and what purpose it has before you even think of adding IoT data or anything like that into your portfolios. You need to be able to tell the machine where that sits. So that's the first point here, and it's something that I think certainly Bola is going to touch on in more specific instances as he unpacks his presentation, but it's something that often can be spread across Excel sheets, or maybe not with a specific convention against it, more just the instance that the organization created maybe decades ago for doing what it had to do. But when you want to get into leveraging all the technology that's out there, having an interoperable structure that you can work with means obviously you can leverage a lot more tools, but it gives you a lot more consistency in the data work you do, and it also de-risks the transformation as you go through it. This then would, once you have your foundation, once you know what everything is called, how it sits in your estates and portfolios, and where they sit, you can start to look at more of the interactions, the process. So we all in FM have lots of dealings with supply chain, and obviously contracts themselves have stipulations around the information that's to flow through them. So this digital approach is really just capturing a lot of that workflow, capturing a lot of that information exchange, and giving again the same rules to the space, the things, the place side of it, but giving very definable parameters that can then become ultimately computer readable. And we have things like SFG20, which is a common maintenance regime that has very definable published structure against it. We have even the emergence of smart contracts, which look for all of these bits of data exchange to keep them live and sort of evergreen. Even things like whole life carbon, as materials pass through the life cycle, as supply chain passes through the life cycle. If you want to get a real handle on whole life carbon without having to audit, then getting some of this process and interaction mapped and modeled means as you go about your usual work activities, all of this data can be live, collecting and collating in the background. And I guess the kind of overarching standard that really looks to tackle this would be ISO 19650, and it's an international standard which comes from a technical committee 59, subcommittee 13, which is looking at BIM. And that standard and its various parts really give rules for a lot of that information modeling and management, and how to define those exchange points, whether it be through projects or any part of the life cycle activities. But it has a little bit of I guess a playbook in how to really at an operational level strategically embrace the process and the interactions that will, obviously continue to go on throughout your operational lifetime. That if you have the foundation of how to understand all your things, your assets, your places, your spaces, then understanding how the interactions and the processes flow. You have a very robust data environment. Once you have data, you need it to be secure. You need to look after it. You need to manage it, as we said. But there's various parts in practice, and something like ISO 27001, again, a very commonly used international standard, governs how information should be kept secure. And that can be the most complex systems on the planet, or that can be a piece of paper that you've printed off holding some sort of information that's not for everyone's eyes. So in 27001, you have some very, I guess, defined process and protocol for how to keep information secure and safe. But then you move to more kind of, I guess, abstracted points on the data. Data is just a tool. It's very rare that the data you look at is a complete reflection of reality. Even the most sophisticated digital twins around today tend to have start and stop points. So you may have a digital twin that looks at energy, and part of the energy analyzes your heating and ventilation systems. When you start to understand that, maybe something like indoor environment is relevant to your heating and ventilation systems. But if you're just looking at energy management, you're maybe not looking at indoor environment conditions at the same point in time. And if you make all your decisions based on purely what you're seeing in energy, you could end up inadvertently resulting in a detriment to the indoor environment condition. And if that detriment happens to make people more drowsy because of increased CO2, then their productivity goes down, and ultimately the organization's not very happy with your energy efficiency drives because their bottom line's been adversely affected. So bringing in a whole life type understanding helps you to really make very informed decisions from your data. And I think one of the most compelling opportunities in front of FM at the moment is to be the champion of the ESG drive. So in environment and social value and governance of any organization are not only aspirations for those that want to do better for the world, they're going to start affecting day-to-day reality. Mortgages, loans, all of these type of mechanics are already starting to be looking for process and protocol around this type of space. And I've got no doubt at all, as the net zero drive continues and we get closer to 2030 or 2040 or 2050 targets, and they're either being met or not, as the case might be, that things like taxation will start to hit these domains. So just now, you don't need to, but this is a case of if FM gets at the front of it, it starts to become one of the, I think, greatest value propositions to any organization. And I think the final point of this is trust. If you're going to make your decision based on data that comes out of your systems, you don't want to be second guessing that at every corner. I've seen far too many instances of new tech being installed in smart buildings or smart estates or campuses, and then it gets to the C-suite and they say, can we really trust this report you've given me that's come out of your IoT or come out of your AI? And the answer is, well, maybe not, and so it doesn't happen. In that instance, you're probably better not putting the technology in the first place if you can't put a parameter around to trust what you're seeing from it and then to make decisions on the back of it. And an example I would give in that regard is asbestos. Asbestos was the wonder material, a phenomenal building material. Magic, it was even called. until you have a whole life understanding and realize it doesn't really work with humans. So all of a sudden now you rip it out. And that's what I fear is at the front of our digital transformation, is we're going to be installing a lot of this tech without the full understanding of either its value or its implications. And then 5-10 years from now, we're going to rip it all out and start again. That's the opportunity for FM, is making lasting, intelligent change. So the final point of my 4 kind of snapshots of the digital FM opportunity is around the actual technology itself that can be added to either assets, to service, or to even transform what is FM in workplace. And these technologies are everywhere. They're on your wrist, they're in the cloud, they're underpinning every transaction, they're even augmenting onto our very reality. And there's no shortage. There's billions going into this space all around the world in every conceivable direction. And having delivered my first smart building project in 2015, a lot of the technology I was using then is at the moment across Europe in about 1% of buildings. So the technology, we almost don't need any new technology, and I don't expect any of the tech vendors to stop. So they're going to keep producing more, better, faster, but we need to start using what already exists and then almost start to help the tech vendors in understanding, and what do we need next? What's going to make our difference? There's no point in us trying to shoehorn in their technologies into the world that we know and understand. We should be the ones working in co-design partnership with them to say, here's where the impact is, here's where you can increase your sales and we can increase our value. So I think in this space, there's not just the opportunity to evolve and innovate on who and what we are, but really an opportunity to reimagine. And we've seen in the first part of this series with Microsoft at their Redmond campus, that's exactly what they did. Now, not everyone has that budget, not everyone has that opportunity in front of them, granted, but you can see the examples there of how they took their workplace service and really changed, starting to look at staff retention, starting to look at logistics on site, starting to look at elements that really the FM workplace professional couldn't do because it would take too much time and resource to work with it all. But when you have all of this well architected, easy to access, persona driven data, then all of a sudden that insight, that competence, that assistance comes to you, just like your social media feeds, just like, anything that pops up in your iPhone or Samsung or whatever device you happen to use. And all of a sudden, if you don't need to break stride to get the insight to keep doing what you already know is the best practice, but augmented with additional understanding, additional innovation, additional power, then it just it liberates you. It frees you from the admin, and then you really can take the value proposition at the core of enhancing and accelerating experience in whatever workplace, whether it's a factory or a corporate office, it doesn't matter. FM can bring a new array of competence and capability that just, we have this huge wave of hybrid working that came about for very good reasons, as we all know. Why come into the office? This is why. We can reimagine every office. We can make it so that people can't get this experience either on their own or with their colleagues from working from home. And they'll be beaten down the door to come into this type of experience if we can reimagine who and what we are. So these 3 previous slides are really the platform that then enables you to implement much change, bring new service, bring enhanced value, and as I say, in my opinion, become the custodian of global ESG and the greatest change makers on the planet. I overshot by a slide there. Apologies, but hopefully that's kind of given a good feel for some of, certainly from myself and the technology special interest group, the opportunities. And I'm not. Hopefully, this isn't coming across as daunting. The entry point to all of this can be very low, can be very achievable. And as I say, in next year's schedule, the Technology Special Interest Group wants to make this digital twin landscape much more real, much more accessible, much more tangible to all of you. Wherever your maturity point is, everyone's on this digital twin journey, whether they realize it or not. If you have one spreadsheet anywhere, you're on this journey. It's just maybe fragmented and isn't labeled as such. But we're here to help you to bring a bit of structure to that drive, and I think own it in your own organization. So thanks for the attention, everyone, and I'll hand over to Bola to go through his presentation.
Gordon, thank you so much. And ladies and gents, I hope you're as inspired as I am, given what Gordon has just eloquently described as the future of FM. So my name is Bola Abisogun, OBE. I've decided to just plot my career over the last 28 years, graduating in '94, currently digital director at BIM Academy. And I put that up there for a reason, just to show the breadth of, I suppose, of my journey, and the fact that in 2018, I decided to become something of a disruptor. And that was predominantly because I wanted to challenge the status quo that Gordon has just described. You know, we as a sector, and in particular, I'm talking about the FM sector, it's time to push the boundaries. And that is what we are doing at BIM Academy. BIM Academy, for those that don't know, is a joint venture between Ryder Architecture and Northumbria University. We are a strategic advisor on all things digital construction. I am focused on a particular workflow that talks and speaks to the Building Safety Act, and in particular the Golden Thread, and bringing to life what the Golden Thread really means, not only from an asset owner perspective, but more around what it means for delivery teams, specifically in this case, facilities managers. But you know, I was feverishly making notes while Gordon was presenting, and I often call these conversations rather than presentations. And I want to have a conversation with all of you today, and it starts with my why. And my why, as a digital construction professional, no longer calling myself a chartered quantity surveyor, is because of what we see on our screen. And we talk about the single source of truth. And in the context of the single source of truth, I've challenged the sector and the industry in two ways. Firstly, if Grenfell Tower had a virtual equivalent of itself, akin to what Gordon has described, and by definition, at least a digital shadow, if not a full operational digital twin, would the fire have happened? And that's a question I'd leave with you as the audience to think about whether that would have happened. And in my utopia position, I'm also asking the question, if the chronology of the pre-construction decision-making workflow had been captured on a blockchain solution, therefore providing an immutable layer of data and information, would we have needed an inquiry? Question mark. And in both of those scenarios, it's the power of data and information management that will provide the answer. On the left-hand side of the screen, and this really speaks to the point Gordon was making around the opportunity for the FM sector. Unfortunately, a tenant was found in a property for 2 years. No one knew that the poor woman had died. Now, given that every social housing dwelling has a legal requirement to have a gas safety inspection done every year, from a data and information management perspective, what happened that allowed the asset owner, in this case Peabody, to not realize that the gas safety inspection hadn't been done for 2 years, right? It's another failure of information management and the power of data to avoid such failures in the future. That is why I'm here. That is why I'm focused on the Building Safety Act in its entirety, not just focusing on fire spread and structural collapse. But from an emotional perspective, I'm here because I'm ashamed. And I'm ashamed that my peer group, you know, everybody seems to be pointing the smoking gun at the contractor in the Grenfell Tower scenario. But in actual fact, the decisions, the critical decisions, most of which were made during pre-construction, led another citizen of this country to post this article, which talks about the surveyors, client, and contractors being killers and crooks. It's an emotive statement, but it talks about how the builders and surveyors knew what they were buying. Again, in the context of the single source of truth, the role of data and information management is key. But what is the role of the FM professional in that context? What is the role of FM prior to the occupation phase? What is it? I don't think the FM sector has been embraced or involved in some of the more pertinent decisions that need to happen during occupation. And I think this unlocking of the opportunity for the FM sector, in my case, care of the Building Safety Act and specifically the role of digital twins, I think it's something that we need to uncover and unpack. So that is why I'm asking the question here. What is a digital twin? And the definition is ongoing, a bit like project manager. The definition is ongoing. From my perspective, and given that I've spent something in the order of 32 months on sabbatical over at Cambridge, the Centre for Digital Built Britain, and I was a co-author of the Digital Twin Toolkit and on the council that produced the Gemini papers in March this year when they went public. A digital twin, by definition, is a virtual representation of a system, asset, or process in its basic form. And with that, we came up with an image that sits within the context of the Digital Twin Toolkit. And on the one hand, if the data flow is one way, you have only created a digital shadow. The power of a digital twin is that the information and data flows go both ways. So speaking to the penultimate or last slide of Gordon's presentation, which mentioned the role of IoT, AI, VR, AR, etc. Internet of Things architectures that are overlaid in either new build or existing assets are probably the quickest way of beginning the journey of creating a digital twin at an asset level. And the IoT architecture should be really tethered to the maintainable assets, anything from hinges to heating and cooling systems, building management systems. You know, there are all number of touch points in assets, but essentially this diagram is attempting to articulate what a digital twin does and the relationship between the physical and the digital world. It's an ongoing conversation, it's an ongoing definition, but the overarching principles are right there on your screen. And the idea is that such data flow will enable and unlock decisions in a timely manner with latency to suit the use case of the twin itself, and the use case is the purpose behind the twin. But it's about unlocking real-time, right-time decision-making that has impact and creates value in all manner of different ways. We can talk about this slide for a whole day to give you an idea of the level of detail of some of the conversations we can have, but at a high level, this is what we're talking about. when we talk about digital twins. The journey of creating a digital twin is relatively simple. It doesn't have to be complex. The best example that I use when I talk about digital twins to young people, and I'm sure there are many young people in this audience, and I consider myself young, even at the age of 51 years young, is the bus network. In London, we have a bus network, and you can stand at the bus stop and you can look at the screen. It can tell you the bus is due to arrive in 3 minutes. Short of 3 minutes, the bus arrives. There is a data flow between the physical bus and the virtual bus stop to tell the passengers that there was a flow of buses moving around the system and your wait time is approximately X or X plus Y. When thinking about the creation of a digital twin, you will have to start with a definition of the purpose. And if I said to you, I am currently working on a digital twin solution that is based on scaffolding, you might laugh. But I see a scaffolding use case as low-hanging fruit, but I'll come back to that at another point. But in terms of articulating what the journey could look like, here are a number of stages put together by a good colleague of mine, Dean Douglas. And he has produced a great piece of work that talks about how we can improve existing work processes using digital twins. And it is the existing work process of the FM sector that I believe are now ripe for disruption. Why? Because we need to understand what's possible. I have my friend, Danny the Green Frog, on the wall behind me. His hands are full of cash. I think it's pertinent that the FM sector begin to realize and recognize the scale of the opportunity before them. I'm a big fan of the FM sector because you are the most important person when an asset is being occupied. And the occupation phase of an asset could be anything from 25 to 30 years, maybe even longer. So what happens pre-construction and during construction is only setting the foundation for the occupation phase of an asset. And the occupation phase of an asset is driven by the FM team. The challenge here today in November 22 is to understand what's needed. And we need to understand what is the real purpose of facilities management. Is it to maintain assets according to budget and no more? Is it to apply sticking plasters on complex challenges and try and figure out what we need to do based on our experience and collective conversations? Is it everything in between? Of course it is. But where do you start? My request from Peter Brogan was to think about what does the skills piece look like for the FM sector. And to be fair, it's very similar for a number of different sectors. I'm a chartered quantity surveyor, working very closely with the Construction Industry Council, Chartered Industry Builders, Royal Institution Chartered Surveyors. I'm challenging the surveying profession around our current business model and our current way of working. I'm also challenging the surveying profession and therefore the FM sector around what is the relationship between our current skill set and that required to operate or coexist in a digital twin environment. Now, I understand there are 3 polls that will be running either simultaneous to or after the presentations of myself and Gordon. But based on the contents of this screen, I want to challenge everyone on the call and for those observing this material after the call, whether there is anything on that screen that either concerns, worries, or excites you. And I, for one, am excited about the new skills being mandated by the evolution of the digital twin opportunity, but also the fact that entities like IWFM are asking the question, what do we need to be aware of to deliver better service and outcomes for our clients? And a client really needs to become more intelligent. So the question is, what is our, and what is therefore is your role as FM professionals, and what on this slide do you think you need to add to your skill set in order to allow you as an individual to become more conversant and therefore competent in a data-driven ecosystem of digital shadows leading to digital twins, but effectively digital asset management. You know, Gordon made reference to the digitalization of data. Risk management will always be there, asset management's there, data simulation. I mean, I could go on and on. We again could talk about this slide for a whole day, but the question is, on a person-centric basis, the question is, what on this slide do you think you will need as an individual to raise your game and to be part of the future of the FM sector in your current role? It's a lot to take in, but the idea is I want to introduce some context, and all of these skills on this slide are required to succeed and deliver, in my case, the Building Safety Act for a client who is embarking on a journey of data and information management. You can go to the nth degree of understanding the information architecture behind the solution, but at a very high level, what skills are required? And they are hard and soft. You also see on the screen communication skills, communication both verbally and in written form, communication via Internet of Things devices. You know, comms is becoming more complex, but yet easier. Agile development, that talks about the ability for you to operate, for example, in a common data environment. You know, is the FM sector taking advantage of CDEs in existing workflows? It's another question. I think that is the last of my slides if I've not been able to press any further, but I want to leave perhaps on this slide and open up the conversation to the audience, if there are any, around what questions need to be asked now of the profession itself, and what should intelligent clients be asking for in their service level agreements. And if we start there, perhaps we can expand the conversation around what future skills will need to look like for practitioners. It's a layered, nuanced conversation, but it's one that I'm excited to explore right now, given that I am advising clients at the moment on producing building safety cases for in-scope buildings, many of which conform to the 7-story, 80-meter high, with at least 2 residential units within them, therefore falling into scope and therefore requiring registration with the building safety regulator by October next year. There is a role in that ambition and requirement, legal requirement, for the FM sector. The question is, what is the opportunity that is staring before the FM sector today, and how will you leverage and commoditize that? So on that note, I'm going to hand it back over to Peter Brogan. Peter, thank you for the opportunity, and ask Gordon perhaps come in and perhaps have a conversation with attendees on the call.
Thank you, Bola and Gordon, on the presentation. And I'm going to go to some polls first, just to get some sentiment on what you've just basically said there, Bola. So just finishing off what you said there in terms of some questions. So yeah, I don't know if we can actually bring the poll up now. We have got some short polls based on what you heard, and we go straight to questions. So based on the presentations today, it's a very emotive question, but how are you feeling? Excited, nervous, and what you've heard about the opportunity as well as the challenges? Maybe I should have had them the other way around in terms of on what you've heard today as an individual within the sector, which many of you are that have joined us today. Are you excited or nervous based on what you've heard today? So I know it's quite emotive. No one's going to be named or shamed on this. It is anonymous, so we're not going to share your view. But from an emotive point of view, it just be a good understanding of where from an emotional point of view, as I keep repeating, you're currently at. So I'll just give it a few moments just to understand based on the presentations today how you're feeling. So if we just close the poll, we should hopefully get those up. So there you go. 84% of our audience are excited with 16% nervous. And now I'm just going to name out the 3 people that had indicated. No, that was a joke, by the way. So so we just go to the questions next, and there is one more poll. So we've done the emotion about excitement. Let's see what our next poll's in store for you. So we just have one more. Thank you to Annie and Lauren behind the scenes that are controlling the poll. So thank you. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how excited are you? So from those that did indicate their excitement, how excited actually are you from 1 to 5? Shall we say 1 being most excited to 5 least excited? So I'll switch it around that way just to explain what the poll means. So if we just close the poll there. So from that perspective, you've got people that are indicating that 5, 14%, 29. So it might have been answered the other way around in terms of excitement level. And I don't know if we got one more poll. Have we got one more poll today? We have, the team will bring it up. And I guess this is an important question, and why you've probably joined us today is actually how ready are you on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of your readiness for this? You've heard from Gordon and Bola. They've set down the challenge as well as the opportunities around this, as I mentioned earlier. How ready are you on a scale of 1 to 5 and what you've heard today and where you currently are respectively in your organisations and as an individual? Just give a few moments. So if we go there, close the poll, thank you. Behind the scenes, working like magic. So yeah, we've got a mixed view there. There's a lot of people sitting on the fence politely. I respect your answers, but you put a 3 there, 4 and 5 in terms of readiness. So a mixed picture there, really. I guess more positivity in terms of some of the responses, but there is a bulk of the audience that are politely bang in the middle. So thank you for the polls there. I think that we close the polls there. Questions have been coming through, guys. So I'm going to just start off with a question here from an audience member. And I think Gordon's currently typing the answer, but from the respect of, in order to start your journey of digitalization, including creating a digital twin in order to get a stakeholder buy-in, documentation of real-world use cases of benefits would be helpful. Does this exist? Any use cases you can reference? So I guess from the perspective, Bola and Gordon, the question there is around, are there any examples of this currently happening? So Gordon, I know you were in the midst of kindly typing the answer back, but I don't know for the rest of the audience, if I can start with you. Really, someone asking there, is there any case studies out there to back up the arguments today?
To be fair, I decided to retract my answer as it started to turn into War and Peace, because the digital twin transformation comes in so many different, it's very rare for you to big bang digital twin transformation. Your budgets need to be astronomical, and you need to say, can you give me 6 months of time to do all of this and not interfere with me while I do that, which is nigh on impossible in 2022. So there are lots of elements and case studies, and certainly from the technology special interest group, this is something in the front half of next year we want to focus heavily on. We've already got conversations with the healthcare working group in IWFM to bring some hospitals into this type of case study focus. There's some work as well across 5 different facility types: airports, hospitals, universities, with some of the work I was doing with Building Smart International. So there's some really good white papers there that are freely accessible through that environment. And I mean, as Bola was alluding to, the excellent CDBB work, there's an enormous array of resource there, and even the new sort of digital twin hub that's replaced that. Again, there's lots there as well. I guess it's a case of what's your first step on that digital twin journey? And that might be, well, we want to get a bit more predictability on our asset performance. So that first step might be we want to put some IoT looking at particular performance around a HVAC system or a boiler, leak detection, something like that. So I would say yes, there's lots, and it's something we are looking to directly tackle and bring a little bit of a environment around. But I think at the beginning, don't try and bite off more than you can chew. Is really look at your own model, look at your pain point, look at your big budget spends, and then start to. One of the other questions was getting into the cost around doing all this. And I can tell you, if your first step on this digital twin journey results in your CFO turning up at your desk saying, wow, what did you do on that first step? Your second step, I can tell you, will have less resistance as the third, as the fourth. So this is a journey. Take it one step at a time and try and look at those risks. I mean, I think as Bola alluded to, if your facility is going to be affected by this Building Safety Act, then that's a very, it's not an optional place to focus, to be honest. But I'll Bola's hands up as well, so I'll let elaborate.
Yeah, so if you can come in, Bola, that'd be great, and then I'll get to other questions that will come flooding through.
Thank you. Just building on what Gordon was saying, I think the biggest challenge I have with this session is 1 hour is not long enough, guys. We need 2 hours. But anyway, that's a side issue. but putting my QS hat on, what a great question. I'm always hit with this question. Where is the evidence there's value creation and the value translates into pounds and pence? Everyone's asking the same question, which is why I'm coming up with use cases like scaffolding, right? And I'll explain later. But the point is, to Gordon's point, this is a journey. And it's one where I want to inspire finance teams very quickly to come on board as allies and partners, because whilst you talk about cost, I really talk about investment. And I talk about the return on investment, which equates to efficiencies and productivity and all the other things that need to happen. In a building safety case environment, it's non-negotiable. It's a legal requirement. It has to happen. There is no way on God's earth where you're going to achieve net zero without twins. So there's a journey that starts with existing buildings, net zero, decarbonization, decommissioning, right? On the existing asset side. On the new build side, it's slightly different and maybe easier, but people drive the entire process. And the investment in people is probably the biggest question we need to address. Not the process, not the tech, not the assets. Businesses have to invest in their people. That's what this conversation is all about, right? The skills required. And unless we get that right, and then translate those skills into operational workflows that yield incremental benefit over time, we're going to be here a year time, 2 years time, 5 years time, talking about the same thing. We have to talk about the investment in people first before we can really think about the investment in assets and the investment in the digital twin solution.
Bola, I completely concur with you. This could have been 2 hours, but we've got an hour today, I'm afraid. So I'm just trying to get through the questions. Bola, I'll come to you. With your vast experience, these are a couple of questions that have come in. In terms of other professions, where are they on this journey? Are others ahead? Are they the same to FM? Are others behind? I guess without being a crude race, if I was looking at a 100-meter sprint, which this isn't a 100-meter sprint, where is FM on that journey? We had some polls there that showed some emotive as well as people's readiness. But from your vast experience and some of the groups you're part of, as well as academia, where's the perceivement of FM? And also, are there any professions, dare I say, that are leading the way on this when we talk about digital skills?
Okay, so I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball to answer this question properly. So I think the most proficient sector in digitization and therefore digital twins is F1. And I'm leaving there.
That's scary, Bola, because that's exactly what I was thinking. 100%.
There you go, buddy. We're in the same space. And I think if I left it there and ask your members to look at what goes on in the F1 sector and specifically Lewis Hamilton's car, the facilities management team in F1 administer Lewis's car. And if you look at the skills that they have, it may become easier to understand where the transferability of their skills exists in the FM built asset sector. There's a common denominator in there, and there's a skill set that's transferable, but it's data driven. And the best asset owners of twins is the F1 sector, right? We can talk about manufacturing and aviation, all the other sectors, even water and some of the utilities as I'm involved in. But the point is, the best example where they have pushed the boundaries of efficiencies and productivity through their teams using data is F1.
No, and I wasn't expecting that answer. So it was a bit of a curveball, and probably to our listeners, viewers, it may be as well. I think from that perspective, particularly in that industry where marginal gains are by the millisecond, particularly as we did ask Lewis to join us, but he did decline today. Joking aside, I think that's an area where you learn from, where actually say, Bola, this has been used regularly and been used for a number of years in terms of those engineering technicians, data scientists, and what's behind the car in particular. That's really important to know. I'm just going to wrap up here. Questions are coming through. I'm aware of time, but I guess if we had to summarize, and there's a lot to summarize, and appreciate we only had an hour today, and there could have been part two. This was third in the series, and the conversation doesn't stop here. Bola, if we're having this conversation this time next year, hope's an interesting word. I've been told by people that whether it's true or not, hope's on the gates of heaven. Well, hopefully I'll get there eventually one day, but not yet. Hope, what's your hope in a year's time if we were having this conversation, where the journey for FM may be head? And maybe it's unfair to say a year's time, this might be a gradual journey, but from your perspective, what would you hope to see for the sector in particular when it comes to digital skills? And I asked the same question to Gordon, just to wrap up.
Thanks, Peter. Great question, and I'll be brief. So again, in context and specifically talking about the Building Safety Act, the application of digital twins or digital processes, because the legal requirement talks about creating, holding, maintaining the information, the golden thread of information in a digital format. That's the legal requirement. How you do it is a question. I'm saying bring in twins and shadows, but I would like to see that by October next year, A, no client has gone to jail. B, we haven't had another Grenfell. And C, the FM sector they understand their role within the creation of a building safety case. And I'll leave it there, because that gives context and relevance to skills.
And really powerful statement of how you started your presentation or discussion today, Bola, in terms of the Grenfell. Gordon, anything to add on that and your view? What would the hope be? Obviously, linking in with questions, we'd love to know from the audience what they would like from the technology SIG moving forward in terms of content in particular. But Gordon, I'll let you have the last word on today's episode.
Well, yeah, I appreciate there's so much we've gone through, and it could easily have gone to 2, 3, 4 hours. But I certainly, if anyone has any of these burning issues, these pain points, then share it with us. We're building the schedule for next year. We want it to be relevant to you and what makes sense to you, not us. But my hope would be that we realise this opportunity. I don't think as a sector we know it's ours yet, but it is ours. And if we don't take it, others will. That's for certain. It will be taken. So my hope would be not that we've done it, not that we've digitized, just that we've realized this is our opportunity to take. And if we have that understanding, then we can make this work for all our benefits.
No, definitely. And I think the challenge is there set for us as an institute to represent the profession, our members, to step up to that challenge. And that echoes some of the work the Technology SIG will no doubt do in 2023 and beyond. So at this point, I want to say questions will be sent on to the to the panelists, just to aware of time, so we couldn't get through every question. At this point, I want to say a massive thank you to Gordon and Bola in terms of your presentations today. They've been great. And now I'm just going to close out with a couple of closing out slides for our members. CPD number, I know that's important to many of our members. That's available here, and obviously the recording will be shortly available on our website of today's webinar also. In terms of something that's really important, another theme is currently in partnership with 12 other chartered bodies, a collaborative research project that I'm actually really proud of, that we're tackling a big topic across a number of professional bodies, not just ourselves. The EDI debate, we have a live survey at the moment that does tackle emotional themes in that and challenges around the EDI debate. So we've had good response to date from that survey, and would encourage you to complete that. It is such an important topic, not only for our profession, but the other 12 professional bodies that are involved in that project. So please complete the survey. Again, shows the power of our community. We've had representation from our technology SIG here with Gordon, as well as David and Hazel in the background today from our technology SIG, helping us with our technical support. Our communities is important to us at the Institute. And yes, it's coming up to Christmas. Can't believe it's 1st of December tomorrow, but there's a couple of events there before we close out for the year for our people management SIG and our public procurement in the Island region. So that's on our events page if you'd like to find out more. So at this point, again, I want to say thank you to Gordon and Bola to go through such an important topic in an hour. Was always going to be difficult, but the key here is the journey doesn't stop here. Again, we've done 3 parts around digital twins as an institute and the technology SIG. We're not stopping there. The recordings will be made available. There are plans for events, guidance, content for next year around the topic. Would encourage our listeners, viewers, to complete a short survey afterwards, just to rate today's, not just to rate today's episode even, but to look at future content. Please let us know. And lastly, again, please look back at part 1, 2 and 3 of this series. Again, there's been a synergy throughout around digital twins, but as I say, the conversation doesn't stop there. So once again, thank you for joining us on the hour. Have a good day, and speak to some of you shortly. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.